Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Reed Show. And I don't know what the hell Ross's background is, but it's lit. It's still like, reminds me of Vegas or something going on here, something funky. Got a lot packed on the show tonight. First of all, thank you to Barroom Network for all their great programming. Check them out at Barroom Network, and you can check our past episodes and podcasts out on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. You can check out all the episodes of this Mac and Reed Show on YouTube as well, and the audio version on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. I'm at The Real Evan Mac on Twitter, and Ross is at Ross Reed. And so a lot to get to, as I mentioned. We're talking Bears to lead off, still kind of piggybacking off what we talked about in episode 1. Best player available, all offense in the second round, all defense. It's all up in the air at this point. The Bulls playoff bound. They're tipping off against the Bucks this weekend, starting the series up. We will make predictions for that and hopeful expectations, I suppose. NBA playoff games are going on. Baseball is back. A lot to get to with baseball. Of course, Clayton Kershaw in the headlines for the wrong reasons, I feel like. Music news, a whole lot more. As we teased earlier, name an actor with no bad movies. Oh, man, I'm excited to talk about that. How's it going, Mr. Ross Reed?
It's good. My background is either Fear and Loathing in the Bar Room, or we're just in the middle of an Earth, Wind, and Fire video. Either way, I'm digging it. Jerome,
yeah.
How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Before we kind of kick it off a little bit and we go on with the Bears with some more draft talk. I know we got the draft. I think it is 10 days from tomorrow. No, a week from tomorrow, something like that, right? We're coming up pretty soon on the NFL draft.
Soon, yeah, I believe it's.
Yeah. So I think it's next week, and then we have of course the Bears first couple picks are on day 2, so we'll be waiting a night. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't address the comments today from Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. He was on the Score earlier today. I think it ruffled a lot of feathers with good reason. I think it was very poor, lazy analysis of him to basically go out and say that Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus were not full in on Justin Fields or not standing behind them, despite the fact that they've had many comments in this offseason praising Fields for his development. And also, the Bears intentionally went out and they had Fields do a press conference right after both guys were hired and introduced for the football team. Let's not mistake this. Justin Fields is the future of this franchise. This team will be built around him, and those two guys know that their futures immediately and also years ahead rely heavily on Justin Fields, and there's no way that they are not behind him as a franchise. And I think it was within poor taste to go out there and have those comments today. I won't speak too much for the Score. I know some people over there. They're good people over there, but as some of these national writers, they have to do a lot better when they're talking about specific teams to kind of read the room and do your homework and know what you're talking about going into this. And I just thought that was poor all the way around. And I couldn't start the draft talk without at least addressing that.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. I think and the quote was, it feels like the Bears are deliberately taking a step back. And the problem is usually teams do that when they don't have a QB they believe in. It just feels like you're fishing for likes or controversy at this point, because we know there's no truth to that. We know that Justin Fields is absolutely the guy. You moved up in the draft, albeit, this is Eberflus's and Ryan Poles' team now. It's a different regime. Absolutely. I don't buy anything that Florio is saying. I think it's all just hoopla, for lack of a better word for it. And it's just ludicrous for me to think that that the Bears organization would be detached from Justin Fields. They would have addressed quarterback in this offseason as a result. Someone as a bridge guy. I think that, regarding Justin Fields, obviously sort of the future of this franchise, a lot of it is on his shoulders. And
Yeah.
maybe Mike Florio feels that way. That's the way I would say it rather than the way that he said it, saying that they're taking a step back and they don't have a quarterback they believe in. That's insane.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, I listen, in a way they are kind of taking a step back, but what they're doing is they're kind of pressing the reset button. We talked about this a ton last week, right? Ryan Pace dealt this team. He had one of the highest aging rosters in the league. He dealt out a ton of money to guys that just were injured and weren't producing like we thought they should have. He added on a ton of void years, which really put the Bears in cap hell. So, what Brian Poles is doing right now is he's getting away from that. He says, look, I want to add more talent on the same timeline of my young, quarterback. And look, we all know that this is a rebuilding year going forward. We know that we're not expecting a Super Bowl, playoffs are probably even a stretch as well. But that's not, in my opinion, taking a step back. That's reading the room, recognizing the situation, and taking a smarter, more analytical approach to this situation, and realizing that you can't go, like we said last week, the Jacksonville route and sign every damn free agent underneath the sun. History shows that does not work. You have to build this team from the trenches, in, out, and you have to do it through the draft. And I think that's what makes this so exciting next week as we see, as we start to talk about, what the Bears are going to do, this whole approach in the off season. But I think that to come out with those comments today, again, it's, early on in April, I think it was misguided, and it was to rile Bears fans up. And I mean, I guess it worked because, it set Twitter on fire today. And here we are talking about it at the top of our show.
Exactly. Draft 2 weeks away, by the way, on the 28th, it'll start that last weekend of April. But regardless, it's again, I'm going to stick with that as far as what Florio has to say. And I know the score loves him, and maybe they had a conversation. Hey, how about this sort of hot take? Because the reality is Justin Fields is not going anywhere anytime soon. And credit to him. I loved his take. We'll get to the Dwayne Haskins news and that tragedy in a bit, but the way he composes himself is really above his age, I feel like, at this point. And the guy, he's coming off a rookie season that was as rocky as it gets, when you kind of knew halfway through, when you're starting to start games, you're not losing the locker room. The locker room is losing. Matt Nagy's losing the locker room, I'm trying to say.
Right.
And it's up in the air as far as management and every other part of the personnel. You're the guy, though. So again, like you said, Ross, they're pressing the reset button. They're going to try to bring as much talent as they can as far as protection around him, and stick to that, but build some depth around him, get more skill position players. Like, don't mess with the run game, really. You have a great back in David Montgomery, but get a guy who's going to be a security blanket for him. Tight end, like we've talked about, is a big area of need. But it's without a doubt, to me, there's no question that Justin Fields is the guy, and anybody else who says otherwise for now, I just think it's insane to me. It's an insane, really early offseason take. It's just trying to stir up Twitter or social media, or just, the Bears pessimists out there. And, there's a lot of disgruntled fans.
It is. Well, we can kind of segue into what the future holds for the Bears as the draft approaches, who the Bears are going, or what the Bears are going to do to surround Justin Fields with the talent that he needs for him to succeed, and for us as a football team to succeed as well. We realize that the quarterback is the most important position on the team. But listen, he's one of 52 other guys in the locker room. You still have to develop this whole team on both sides of football in all three phases as well. Special teams, we saw the Bears go out there and sign the Colts linebacker last week, special teams ace. So that also factors in, and that leads us to kind of our topic for this week for the Bears related is, we know that the Bears have 2 second-round picks right now coming up in a couple weeks. What do you do with those 2 second-round picks? Do you go, kind of traditional best player available, offense or defense, Or do you say, look, we intentionally didn't go out this offseason and add a ton of offensive talent for Justin Fields because we didn't like the prices, we didn't like the fit, so on and so forth. They tried to sign the guy from Buffalo, the guard, didn't quite work out. That's fine. We'll move on. Now, do you go wide receiver, offensive lineman? Do you go wide receiver, wide receiver? Do you go offensive lineman, offensive lineman? Or do you go BPP, best player available? Do you say, we'll take a safety with our first pick in the second round, or we'll take a corner with our first pick, with our second pick in the second round? It's really an interesting question and dilemma. I personally tend to lean both picks should be offensive minded. I think you should take the best offensive players on the board. But I guess I kind of want to hear from you and hear from the comments and stuff like that to hear, what do you guys think? If a rock star safety is on the board, should he be taken, or do we stay with the path of going offense?
It's certainly best player available because there's so much need out there. And I entrust that whole war room that Ryan Poles is assembling. And I think that it does come back to the best player available. I think when you look at around the league, offensive linemen, it's so hard to get the guys out there that are just super tough interior linemen, or looking at your blind side, looking at guys who will pave the way, running lanes on the right side, right tackles, but also the defense. It's like we talked about. There's a lot of success when you're a ball hawking defense like this, and I think that secondary did not do the Bears any favors last year, and certainly up front, this defense is completely different. Robert Quinn may be coming back, but is he going to have the same year as last year? Not likely. This guy's seemingly pretty up and down. You'd like someone to be alongside Roquan Smith, maybe. There's a lot of directions to go, but seriously, Jalen Johnson, you're looking at hopefully a cornerback. I would say at one of those picks in the second round. Ideally, you want to do best of both worlds, because clearly wide receiver, there's some talent out there. And we know this is a pretty wide receiver heavy class. Mm-hmm. And I'd say between the two positions of need the most, to me, I think filling that hole where Kyle Fuller left is super important. If there's someone in the second round they can look at, that would be the way I would spin it. And then the wide receiver, like we talked about, Ohio State has, some of the best wide receivers in the land, and Alabama has all this depth. And there's some guys that are just going to fall by the wayside. Like obviously these big blue chip programs are going to garner a lot of attention. But I think that, you just take those best player available based on those two positions, I'd say. But offensive line, I think, Ross, what do you think about that? Do you think you would go offensive line first or defensive line? Am I wrong in my opinion here?
So, I mean, where I stand at, I think the Bears have to come out with who they feel is a stud wide receiver in one of these second round picks. And the reason why I say that is right now you have on paper one of the worst receiving cores in the league, and you do need to surround Justin Fields with adequate weapons to fully evaluate him. Also, you look around the league and you realize that wide receiver has increasingly become the second highest paid position in the NFL now, right? So, in my eyes, the best way that you can kind of succeed in winning this league is if you can get a stud wide receiver and stud quarterback on their rookie contract. Well, look, we already got the quarterback, right? Hopefully he's a stud. He's on his rookie contract. If you can find yourself a stud wide receiver on your rookie contract as well, then we know the Bears are going into the offseason next year with a shit ton of cap space. And the fact that you might not have to, I mean, these wide receiver numbers in the offseason have been crazy. We saw what Devontae Adams has gotten. We saw what these other guys have gotten. It's just been, Stephon Diggs just got paid the other day. These are absolutely insane numbers. Wait till guys like Justin Jefferson and stuff like that get paid. So if you can find that stud receiver to pair with the quarterback and have them both on a rookie deal, and then use your free agent money next year to allocate that to other different areas, that's personally what I would like. I would like a nasty offensive lineman on this team, preferably a tackle or an interior guard on the left side. But I'm not opposed to going with a cornerback or something like that. But I do think the wide receiver sets precedent. That doesn't mean that I'm saying it has to be at 39. You could trade back from 39 to accumulate another third round pick, or maybe you could take the wide receiver. Maybe it's a guy like Pierce, and they think that Pierce is a stud, and you can get him with your second round pick. I'm okay with that, but I do think that coming out of this, you need a stud wide receiver. There's a lot of smoke today about Pickens, the wide receiver from Georgia, saying that he's probably not going to make it past the early 40s. Well, hell, the Bears pick at 39. So if that's your guy, then you take him, damn it. And I'm fine with that. But then, the next pick, I would lean more towards best player available with a slight edge to offensive line. But if there's a stud safety or corner on the board, I'd probably take him first.
Yeah, the wide receiver is a big question mark, and you want a guy where Justin Fields can build a lot of confidence with and feel comfortable and really be the answer that you thought Allen Robinson would be to Justin Fields. I know he had some good chemistry with Darnell Mooney, but you look at, again, George Pickens, John Dotson from Penn State, Christian Watson, North Dakota State. What are these guys will probably get picked either around that pick with 39 that the Bears have in the first part of their second round picks. So I would be 100% behind those guys. I think that often I side with you though too. I think you need to look at the offensive line. There's not a lot of leadership. I mean, I know you just signed Lucas Patrick and he'll be the leader, but Cody Whitehair, Dakota Dozier is just a guy. I feel like also right tackle would be very huge because I'm not 100% convinced that Larry Borum is that guy. And I think, they are one injury away from having a big hole at the right side of that offensive line. Defensively, again, I think that there's a lot to be said for going up front and finding, a guy on the defensive line who could be just a monster and who could disrupt the passing game of opponents in the NFC North. That would be really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of smoke right now around a lot of these, players in the draft with the Bears. Tyler Smith has been a popular name. As a guy that might fall to the Bears if he slips out the first round. He's the offensive lineman, the tackle out of Tulsa, excuse me. But I saw a mock draft today that had Kyler Gordon going to the Bears. He's the stud cornerback from Washington, and it's like, does Ryan Poles pass up that kind of talent? Other guys on the board, Christian Watson might be there as well. We talked about him a lot last week, but you talked about guard and the other offensive linemen, Zion Johnson from Boston College, Daniel Fael is another guy I'm thinking about from Minnesota. These guys are, yeah, exactly. I mean, these guys are all going to be there. Or, I mean, we saw Ryan Poles try and sign a 3 technique, right, in the offseason, try and pay him big money. So, I mean, does a guy like Logan Hall, a defensive tackle from Houston, kind of jump out from him? But then again, there's a stud safety in Baylor, Petrie, I think his name is, so it's going to be really interesting. To me, still lean when you go 2 picks in the second round, 1 pick in the third round. My ideal situation is to get a wide receiver and 2 solid offensive linemen from there. Or I wouldn't hate 2 wide receivers as well and a stud offensive lineman. But I look at that receiving core. I'm a huge Darnell Mooney fan, but I'm not too high on a lot of the other guys, even the guys they signed, Equanimous St. Brown,
Right.
The young man from, even I like Pringle, but I think Pringle is best served as your 3 or 4 and not as your primary receiver. And we know they don't have any explosiveness from the tight end position. Cole Kmet is a solid player. He's a good blocking tight end. He's going to, he's not explosive. He's not explosive really in the red zone. Wasn't a big red zone target last year. So I would like for them to get more weapons for Fields, especially for him to be able to push the ball downfield. Now, it always becomes a chicken and the egg situation because in order for him to push the football downfield, he obviously needs time to do so. And that's where the offensive line comes back into play.
Yeah, no question there. And this offensive line has changed quite a bit and it will look different, but so is the defense to that end. And that defense, obviously a huge hit with Khalil Mack gone. I know it wasn't his best year last year, but just the presence he commands there, commanding double teams, and it made Robert Quinn's season, as you saw too. So that's a big hole to fill, and it all starts up front there.
Mhm.
You know, the new Bears that were signed, like you mentioned, we had Ryan Griffin getting signed from the Jets to Chicago. Kind of fills a need, I suppose, when you get a veteran tight end there. And I know that's a big need of yours, in your opinion, Ross. But Matt Adams at linebacker, an Eberflus guy. He's likely a special teamer, formerly with Colts, and then more depth in secondary with Tavon Young at corner, formerly with the Ravens. He's had a lot of injury problems, though. That should be said for sure.
He's a good He's a good nickel when he's healthy, though. So hopefully he's healthy this year. He's a good nickel.
It should be said too, the second round in Bears history has been pretty promising with guys like Mike Singletary, Charles Tillman, Devin Hester, Matt Forte. I think
Adam Sheen,
certainly Adam Sheen. Yeah, there's also those misses, right? It's such a crapshoot. Like we look at the first round picks, and even that is tough when you look at the offensive line picks that have been made by the Bears in the past. You just be like, oh my God, they drafted that guy, and Devin Hester. Who knew that Devin Hester would be Devin Hester? You just really don't know, and all these combines only mean so much, and scouting reports until they go and hit the field, and there's a lot to be said with their the way they mesh with these other teammates too.
Yeah, which is why I think we have to realize that this is all such an inexact science, and we these guys grind tape, they do interviews. They have in-person visits. They do so much homework, and even us as fans do so much homework on all these picks. And we really don't know how any of these guys are going to shake out until about 2 to 3 years down the line. It could be such a crapshoot. I mean, we were all excited when, for example, like Anthony Miller was drafted. We thought that he was going to be a dynamite player for us for a long time. He didn't have the mental capacity, as it seems, to be able to withstand succeeding in the NFL. And it's just like, how can you quantify that, especially from our end as fans, when we're just looking at the tape and we're like, that guy should be a home run player. He's explosive. He's got hands. He's got talent. He just doesn't have it between the ears. And now the guy, I don't even know if he's in the NFL right now, but stuff like that always happens. And that's what makes this such a difficult process. And that's why, Ryan Pohl is getting paid the big bucks. That's why he's driving the Mercedes-Benz that we saw that opening clip when he was hired. And let's pray that the Bears are able to come out of this draft with at least 4 solid starters, because that's a dream. No matter where they're at on the football field, if they can come out of this draft with at least 4 solid starters, then I think we're in good hands going forward. The wins and losses don't matter to me this year as much as the development of Fields and the rest of these young players on the team.
Yeah, you need to see the offense take the next step, and the first step is running the NFC North, right? You got to prepare for life after Aaron Rodgers, and now make it competitive between those two, because Detroit's a mess. Minnesota, Kirk Cousins isn't the guy, even though he's getting paid like he's the guy. You just got to get past those guys to start, and you get to see all 3 of those teams twice a year. It's a good warm up. And then the Bears, historically have tougher schedules like that. You have to build that chemistry early on. This will be a very telling sophomore season for him, with behind this offensive line that might have some injuries. And then who knows with the newer wide receiving core, how it will look. But hopefully you get that guy who will be what an Allen Robinson was, or what Alshon Jeffrey was too. So it remains to be seen. Let's move on, Ross. Talking about the Chicago Bulls, and the playoff hype video with Common was fantastic. I hope that's not the only good thing to come from these playoffs. And again, the series will tip off against the Bucks this weekend on Easter Sunday. It's kind of exciting, but makes me very nervous as they prepare to play this team that is stacked, man. They're stacked, and they're getting healthy at the right time. With the bigs especially are concerning, Serge Ibaka and Brook Lopez. And then, like we mentioned in the last episode, Drew Holiday. Giannis is obviously going to play like he has been playing. The big question is, can they contain Giannis? I think it starts with that, and no one has been able to, obviously, since last season. Again, he's a perennial MVP candidate, one of the best big men out there. He's making his free throws now. He's playing smart basketball. He's good at facilitating. He's a great leader now. Can they try and couple Tristan Thompson and Vucevic together to try and stop him? Or, is the backcourt really going to provide that spark? Because, you're going to need DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and a third guy to go off. We know LaVine and DeRozan will get theirs. DeRozan can take over the fourth quarter. He could be a closer in tight ones, but that third guy, it remains to be seen again, Ross. I think that, again, we thought it might be Lonzo Ball, and it's not that guy at this point. It might be Kobe White. It might be another outlier. Alex Caruso is going to provide some big minutes, and it just remains to be seen. What are you thinking about game one? What are we going to see? We're going to see a tight game, but I feel like starting off in Milwaukee,
Yeah.
you got to give it to the Bucks to start off strong here. And Giannis has one of those great, almost triple-double games.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bucks are plus 340 to sweep this series. It's one of the lowest odds heading into the playoffs for a team to sweep. The Bulls have some of the highest odds right now in terms of them not being able to even take a game in this series, even over a lot of the play-in teams, which is just nuts to me. But that's just a testament to where this team is kind of limping in at heading into this playoffs. I do think that the break and the rest that they're getting right now, they're getting a full week off basically, will help them. It's to their advantage. I think DeMar was exhausted at the end of the season. I mean, he had to carry a lot of the weight all year with these injuries involved. It'll help Zach LaVine obviously with his knee. Hopefully it'll allow a guy like Vucevic to rest up and get going again. But they're still really undermanned. They miss Lonzo Ball a lot. You kind of hit that on the head. I mean, the Bulls, one of the worst volume three-point shooting teams in the league. And remember, Lonzo, when he was hurt, this guy was tossing up 6-7 3-pointers a game and making them at a 40% clip. And the Bulls just don't have another guy like that on the roster that can be able to pick up that slack. And I think that's really hurting them. In my opinion, I would try and get more opportunities for Patrick Williams. We saw him on Sunday night against the Timberwolves. Granted, it was kind of a throwaway game, but nobody else played out there. And you can see that this guy, he's got skills. There's a reason why he was picked top 5 for a reason. He has an offensive game. I think he's just way too passive, especially when guys like LaVine and DeMar are on the court. But what do you have to lose in being able to try and open him up more and open up his offensive game and put more pressure on the Bucks, who don't really have, to me, a ton of great wing defenders, right? I think Drew Holiday is a great defender, but he's a guard. He's probably going to be on either DeMar or Zach the entire game. Middleton's going to take the other guy, but Giannis kind of likes to roam around and kind of play center field. But outside of that, it's guys like Bobby Portis who can't move his feet on defense, and guys like Brook Lopez can't move his feet on defense. You have to use Patrick Williams to your advantage, in my opinion, and use him, to me, as that pseudo third option, and kind of use Vooch as a decoy / pick and pop kind of guy. I voiced my opinion on Twitter the other night about Vucevic. I'm not a big fan. I don't think he's coming back next year, but what else do you have to lose if you're the Bulls heading into these playoffs? I do think that game one is their best opportunity to win a game in this series, right? They're rested. The Bucks will be rested as well, but they might be a little rusty. They might be a little complacent coming in. And I think that's your best opportunity to punch them in the mouth. It's kind of like similar to, when the Bulls would go against those Miami Heat teams in the Derrick Rose years, and they were able to sneak away game one in the Eastern Conference Finals, right? That's your best opportunity to hit a giant in the mouth is the first game. After that, I don't think it looks good for the Bulls. I don't want to be too pessimistic. Anybody going out to the games next week, have a blast. This team has not been in the playoffs in a long time. I do think that the arrow is still pointing up on this franchise. I believe in Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley to be able to retool this roster in the offseason and hopefully make it better. But this is going to be a rough rough bump in the road coming up to hopefully better days in the future.
I'm conflicted because this Bulls team really limped into this postseason, right? They lost 3 straight, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say the Timberwolves, you go out on a win, but with the starters, I'm saying, when it wasn't a throwaway game there and you're resting all these starters. So to the point about rest, it is important when Caruso needs that rest, and Pat Williams could certainly get more time. Kobe White has kind of been on and off hurt as well. But yeah, to me, it also comes back to the bench and how that's a good time to take advantage of Giannis being out, obviously, because the scoring seems to diminish, of course, when he's out and Drew Holiday and you lose Chris Middleton from that starting lineup. So Bobby Portis comes in, like you mentioned, a guy like Grayson Allen, George Hill. That's when you hope that guys like Caruso can shine. Well, Caruso, will likely be starting, so Kobe White can come with big minutes. Patrick Williams, like you said, Tristan Thompson. He's supposedly this guy with so much vet experience, and even though he's a cheap deal and he serves a purpose as just a rental big man, this is what you signed him for. Derrick Jones Jr., where has he been? I know he missed some time with injury. I agree with you, Ross, that this is a good opportunity, but I think you just need to make it a series. I think that Milwaukee might as well be a home game for this Bulls team. It travels well to Milwaukee. We saw the news that they were the number one selling home crowd and away crowd as far as fanship, which was great to see. And that speaks to this team. So support that does play into it, because you remember the bubble, that was not a factor in any means. So I'd say you have to just see how that first game is. It'll be a dogfight. I think it'll be more competitive than the games we've seen the Bulls play against the Bucks. But those starters, obviously, it's going to come down to Levine and DeRozan. And with all this talk about Vooch, you would hope it would light a fire under his ass, right? Like, this is the guy who kind of set off this whole how it formed this team, Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, that you don't get DeMar DeRozan, and maybe you don't get Caruso, maybe you don't get certain guys like that. The rest of it's kind of built through the draft. But yeah, this guy, it's about time. He has a tough assignment, obviously, having to guard Giannis to that end. But I'm curious to see what Billy Donovan does too, going up against a great coach in Milwaukee. And if he has what it takes, he keeps talking about making those adjustments and learning from mistakes and yada, yada, all the coach speak. But can he turn it into wins? I don't think it's a sweep, but we're looking at maybe 5, maybe 6 games.
5, yeah. I'm very curious to see, how Zach performs. I mean, listen, this is the NBA playoffs. This is the time of year where the stars shine and the stars lift their teams. And this is the time of year where rotations get limited and your stars play, 40 minutes a night. We saw it last night with Kevin Durant. Cleveland put up a good fight, but that's fucking Kevin Durant over there. I mean, you're not going to beat that guy. You know what I'm saying? When your name is, Darius Garland. That's no diss to Darius Garland, but stars are just they lift teams. This time of year. And with this being Zach LaVine's first playoffs, I'm really curious to see how he goes out there and performs in his first playoffs. It's going to be very interesting to see as he starts to build his legacy, so to speak, in this league as a young man. I want to see him play very aggressive, but play also still within control and use his talent to the best of his ability, because this is a guy that can go out for 35. On any given night. And if he does it efficiently, then, the Bulls can at least make a lot of these games very competitive.
Absolutely. With LaVine and DeRozan, it's like you talked about, very little experience with Zach LaVine, obviously going into the playoffs for the first time. And then DeMar DeRozan, who's still chasing that first ring at this point and kind of the journeyman that he is. It's a tough assignment, and they're going to need to step up. And now that they have the rest that they need, they're going to have to lead the pack. They're going to have to be those guys. I think that a lot of people are saying in the chat here as well, Patrick Williams, he's got to be that guy. You've waited, most of the season for him to come out and have big minutes. But defensively, it's a tough assignment, because Milwaukee are the reigning champs for a reason, and they're rolling into this postseason as hot as they have been all year.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the rest of the NBA, Brooklyn and Minnesota are moving on to the playoffs into the 7-game series.
I thought the Minnesota Timberwolves won the NBA championship yesterday. You sure about that?
I thought they did too. Yeah,
the way they celebrated, I thought
the way Patrick Beverley had the most insane range of emotions. He was out on the scorer's table just throwing his jersey into the crowd. Then he's crying. Then he's taking Instagram live saying "fuck the Clippers." It was just absurd to me.
He's drinking a Bud Light during the post game.
Bro, this is the playing game. I guess get hyped. And I know a lot of people were hating on him for whatever reason, but you carry that over to Memphis. Whatever. That's going to be a hell of a series. But Brooklyn, then it's like we figured for the Nets as Kyrie and KD went off with doubles each and they beat the Cavs soundly. They'll play the Celtics in the first round. That should be an exciting series as well. But yeah, T-Wolves looking real spicy. They're going to play Memphis, and Patrick Beverley talks his shit, man, like you have to expect. And Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell, they might make this a series. I still don't think they'll beat Memphis, but I mean, you win that first playing game, it's what it is. And
some girl glued herself to the floor. Did you see that?
That was odd. Yes, the gluing to the floor. Like, what are you doing tonight? I'm going to glue myself to the hardwood. That was the most bizarre thing. Something we've never seen before. It was completely unusual. I'd say, well, back to the Nets. This is that sort of, you can't even call them a dark horse. They just happen to be a lower seed where they could be going to the NBA Finals or at least the conference finals with, maybe the Bucks or whoever comes out of that matchup. But the Celtics have been peaking at the same time too. And then the other games we got, the playing games, Hornets and Hawks, which is going on right now, 70-60 or whatever, and then Pelicans and Spurs. I just see, the winners get to play. Spurs get to play the Clippers if they win, or whoever wins that matchup for the 8th seed in the West. And then between Hawks and Hornets, they play the Cavs for the 8th seed. This playing stuff is stupid. It's very aggravating. We know it's a money grab.
Right. It's like the shrimp cocktail before you get to the nice $100 steak. So, and I don't like shrimp cocktail, but I mean, it's making the league a lot of money, but I can't wait for the playoffs to start. Kyrie in Boston, going back to Boston is going to be, very fun, very interesting. It took Kyrie until April to all of a sudden, not see a shot that he didn't like. But he's coming in on fire right now, and Kevin Durant is hot, and Boston was really hot at the end of the season, so I think that is going to be a really fun series. But I'm excited for just the rest of the playoffs to get going, to see what like Joel Embiid is going to do, and see how Phoenix. I think Phoenix is the best team in basketball right now. How are they going to come out and respond? But then can the upstart Memphis Grizzlies kind of give them some go as well? So let's get this playing bullshit out of here. Let's get the real playoffs started. And let's start to get some quality basketball heading into the summer.
Ross, give me the line about Kyrie again.
He didn't like him. He didn't. Now all of a sudden he doesn't like a shot he didn't like. I didn't stick.
I don't know.
I didn't stick the landing.
You tried your best.
I did.
It's an exciting. Yeah, that's an exciting series with the Celtics and the Nets. It really there's a lot of bad blood in the first round. I would feel like if it all pans out the way you would expect it to.
Yeah.
I know that obviously the playing games are not what we want to see, but Toronto and Philly, Denver and Golden State, Dallas and Utah, whoever plays Miami, that's going to be tough. And again, the road goes through Phoenix and Milwaukee for sure. But it's just one of the most exciting times. There's a lot of good spots playing right now as I was watching the playing games before the show. And I'm curious to see who comes out as MVP for one too.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the ratings came out today for the year, and the ratings are up in the NBA, so business is good for them right now. I think the league has a ton of good young talent top to bottom, and I think that's been reflected in people watching more basketball this year. So I think that the NFL playoffs kind of set the bar for 2022. We had some outstanding games. We got Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes, and we got Joe Burrow with doing his amazing stuff, and we saw what the Rams were able to do as well. Even Tom Brady, when we thought was his last game on the way out, had a terrific game against the Rams. And now let's see what the NBA can do. Let's see what some of these stars can do. And I think a big part of the story, not that I want to centralize everything about LeBron, but this is a playoffs without LeBron. And I think this is for the first time ever. We're like, we're okay with that. Like I don't think I hear a lot of people saying, oh shit, we missed LeBron James in the playoffs. I think a lot of people are okay with that. And that speaks to the overall health of the league going forward. And we realize that, look, this guy, he's given us a great 17-year career or whatever. And we know he's coming back next year. So I'm not kicking him out, but he is on the way out. He can't keep doing this, but at least we're in good hands going forward with the quality of talent in the league. You got guys like John Morant and Trae Young and Jason Tatum and all these young superstars and Joel Embiid. And like, we've got 3 big men this year that can win the MVP, and Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis. And Luka Doncic is a superstar, right? And so I think that Adam Silver and the rest of the NBA should feel really excited about where things are going, and hopefully we get a good playoffs out of it.
They certainly should, because the question, regardless of the outcome of these playoffs, certainly who will be, can the Suns go back to the finals? Can they get past all these new young bloods in the West, like you mentioned, Ja Morant and Luka Doncic peaking at the right time, and out of the East, who can challenge Giannis? If it's Embiid, if Durant goes back, but between those guys, it's who's that next LeBron, right? Who's the face of the NBA? Who's it going to be? And it's going to be quite a run. And even a guy like Anthony Edwards, who's really young, there's a lot of young talent out there. There's a lot of sort of middle of the road guys. There's a guy like Kevin Durant, who's almost up there in LeBron's age range too, who's looking for another ring as well. Steph Curry's out there too. So it's really old guard meets new, and I like it because we it's been dominated by LeBron regardless. There was a stat about the Spurs not having a televised game. Their first televised game is later tonight. They're nationally televised.
Right.
Televised, but nationally televised game. They didn't have a nationally televised game all year, and LeBron and the Lakers had something like 40.
Could you name 5 guys on the Spurs roster off the top of your head?
5 guys? No, I can't.
I can name like Greg Popovich count.
It's Popovich count. You can name one guy.
I can name Dewan Murray, Jakob Portal, and you got me.
So maybe they're not nationally televised for good reason.
Absolutely.
You got to let all these, even the scrub teams, get on the national televised schedule. You got to flex them in there at least once. Come on, not one. Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out as these playing games wrap up and we get the real action this weekend starting off. Move on to baseball, Ross.
Let's do it.
Baseball's back.
It's back.
How you feeling about White Sox? It's obviously very early. We're seeing Luis Robert off to a hot start on the south side. And there's early, I don't know, injury concerns with Lucas Giolito. It's all all good. It's going to be, you're resting early for good reason.
It's going to be fine. The White Sox are getting hit with the injury bug early on, but I feel like every team is going to get hit with their injury bug early on. As spring training was shortened. These guys had to ramp up pretty quickly. We saw Clayton Kershaw get pulled today from a perfect game. I think there was to protect him. He had only had a 72 pitch simulated start before this game. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think you're going to see a lot of teams trying to really back off on a lot of their players early on. We saw over the opening weekend, a lot of the starting pitchers only went like 4 or 5 innings max because they didn't have a elongated spring training. Even still, the White Sox took care of business in Detroit. They're winning right now in a rain-soaked, guaranteed rate field against the Mariners. They won yesterday, their home opener against the Mariners. So, if the White Sox can tread water here the first couple weeks of the season until they get their reinforcements back with Giolito and Joe Kelly, and Moncada's got to come back, and AJ Pollock's got to come back, then they're still the best team in AL Central. And that's all I care about is at the end of in October, if this team is number 1 in the AL Central going into the playoffs and they're healthier than they are right now, then giddy up. Let's ride.
Sure. The offense isn't going to skip a beat while Giolito, and if there's any pitching concerns in the meantime, that's how it's got to be. If it's not Luis Robert, then whoever else needs to step up to that end, and Tim Anderson or insert guy here. And on the north side, Cubs, similar good start, at least winning season so far, with Seiya Suzuki off to a great start. Got a little heated against the Brewers this past weekend too. They're trying to fight each other, and there's 5 batters hit by pitches in that game where benches cleared. I haven't seen that in a while. The North Side, this is obviously a big transition time. You talked about the Bears in a rebuild. I don't really know what the future is for this Cubs franchise, and I know that they just care about the bar and hotel and restaurant scene in Wrigley at this point. If you're looking at the Ricketts, but you got to field a decent team, I would think. So you're seeing some new names as opposed to obviously the departure of Javi Baez and Anthony Rizzo and the big names like that and Chris Bryant's. Like, it's just a very weird time if you're a Cubs fan when you're saying a guy like, oh, Seiya Suzuki. I've never heard of him, but he's off to a great start. He's I don't know.
I'm a huge fan of the. I was gonna say I'm a huge fan of the prayer hands like bow on the home run that he does. Like,
Yeah.
huge fan.
Sure, that's a nice celebration. It's nice to see some competitive baseball early on here. And as far as it is as early as it is, I think you have to circle back and talk about the Dodgers pulling Clayton Kershaw during that perfect game bid because of the pitch count. And Kershaw's quote was, "Those are selfish goals," talking about the perfect game. We're trying to win. That's really all we're here for. Man, get out of here with that. If I'm Kershaw, I'm staying in. I'm not letting anybody pull me out. You already won a World Series. I guess you have nothing to prove. I'm proving my own point. You won a World Series, all the awards you want. You have a no-hitter, but go for the perfect game.
But that's the thing, though.
This would have been the 24th.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. It's like, does a perfect game really do anything for you nowadays as a fan? Like, it doesn't really. Is it like really must-see TV like it used to be? This guy is up there in age. He's in his 30s. He's had a shit ton of injuries already. He's trying to win another chip, and they know like he hasn't thrown 100 pitches probably since late September last year. And if you try and like max that arm out in April just to get him a perfect game, and he blows his arm out, and they risk winning another World Series because of that, it just wasn't worth it to get the 24th perfect game in Major League Baseball history. I think they did the right thing. Dave Roberts will take some shit for it today. He'll take some heat for it, but I think you didn't see Clayton Kershaw complaining. He knew about the bigger picture, and a week from now, nobody's going to remember this, and especially if the Dodgers are in first place in September and Kershaw is still healthy, everybody's going to remember they did the right thing.
I guess I hate to see any regrets in that sense, but like you said, you're one pitch away from having another Tommy John surgery or some ridiculous injury, and the Dodgers are well set to go deep into the playoffs again. There's so much money behind that team and Clayton Kershaw that he's going to be that guy, and he'll be pitching as many pitches as he needs to in the postseason. That's for sure. So I get that aspect of it, but you wonder if he has any regrets when you're really feeling it like that. And you're just thumping the other team and throwing heat. So we'll see. We'll see. Let's go to some quick hits at the end here, Ross, as we're wrapping up the show and lead off on the somber note. But the voice of Iago, he's gone. We lost the comic legend and Gilbert Gottfried, who was a great voice actor. As I said, Iago, and he had that very nasally, just some might say annoying sort of voice, but he was hilarious with everything he was in. I think, obviously the comedy community rallied behind him. I know he was at the roast of Bob Saget. He was great in that. And we lost Bob Saget recently too. It's a big bummer. And, as far as his family goes, he had the long illness and all. I got to meet him when I was an intern at WGN, and he was nice enough. A lot of guys can just be dismissive at that point. They're just like, hey, you're an intern, whatever. He was on air. He was talking about Bing Crosby beating his kids. Like, he had a very dark sense of humor too. And, it is what it is as far as him being lost in the comedy community. But man, it's tough when you see these guys like him, Louis Anderson, and Bob Saget. I saw we're all in a picture together. We lost all of them pretty recently, and they're just gone like that. And they're all just hilarious people.
Exactly. I mean, great. That guy actor, the voice, of course, you talked about. He was Iago in Aladdin. The fact that him and Robin Williams were sharing, scenes together and stuff like that, and we lost both of them, but. I remember him. He was in like Beverly Hills Cop 2. He's been in, Look Who's Talking, Problem Child. Just, it's a lot of movies that I remember growing up as a kid in the 90s and 80s. And like, you just instantly heard that voice. You started laughing. And the fact that he took his unique talent for his voice and his comedy, and the man stretched it into a 30 plus a 3 decade plus career is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he was working all the way up until the end. I mean, even I'm looking at his IMDb right now, and he's got some stuff that is he was working on some stuff that's in pre-production now, but he was doing a lot of short story stuff and a lot of animated content.
Yep.
He did some stuff with Stephen Colbert as well. So we lost a legend. It always hurts when we lose these guys, but I think when we lose comedians like this, the saving grace is that we can still go back to their art and laugh and enjoy it. And RIP to him. He talked about Norm Macdonald. Norm Macdonald is one of my favorites that we lost last year as well. Just a great,
Yeah.
these guys have that great dry humor that I think that we just don't get anymore. Kind of from like that Don Rickles kind of age of humor. I just, we don't get that kind of stuff anymore. So RIP to him.
Look how happy he is next to me.
Yeah, look at you guys. That's a young Evan. Nice
That's
sweater.
a young Evan. Younger, fatter. He had the cashmere sweater for his intern days. Yeah. Gilbert was rubbing the fabric behind me.
He was like, "Who's this weird guy with the brown sweater
I
on?"
really like your sweater. In music news, Ross, if you saw or heard last week's episode, we're big into hip hop, and the return of Blsck Star is coming many moons later, just years later at this point.
Yes,
Where people
man.
are like, Blsck Star, who? We're the
Yes.
20s kids. What is this generation called? The TikTok generation? They don't know who Blsck Star is.
I don't know.
But their album, No Fear of Time, will be out May 3rd on their podcast platform. Luminary, as I roll my eyes, they just put their single out, Mineral Mountain.
Yep.
Blsck Star keeps shining.
Yes,
But what's with the release on the podcast network? Come on.
Blsck Star was one of my favorite albums when I was in college at
understand.
Hampton University. Outstanding album. If you've never heard it before, go listen to it ASAP. Evan and I saw Talib Kweli and Mos Def in concert at the Taste of Chicago a couple of years ago.
At the Taste.
Yeah, so those guys are absolutely amazing. I'm excited to hear the album. Madlib is doing the production. He does not miss.
Does not miss.
Yeah, so I'm excited for it. We haven't heard anything from Mos Def in years, so within itself is a treat right there. But to hear both of those guys together is going to be awesome.
Yasin Bey.
Yasin
Bey,
Bey.
the artist formerly known as Mos Def, I guess.
That's right.
I guess these artists are really just trying to control the royalties with things like this. And Kanye, whatever bullshit he's on, whatever streaming service that he released Donda 2 on, but more power to him. Well, folks, the time has come for Ross to be the Debbie Downer that he is, and he can shit on the HBO series Winning Time. That is the story of the Lakers dynasty back in the 80s.
Move this man!
Come on, Ross. What's not to like? Look at this cast. First of all, you got John C. Reilly. You got the kid who looks just like Magic. You got the Australian playing Jerry West. You got Adrian Brody, the guy who was playing Kareem. I guess he actually played college ball, and he's like 6'11", and he's a teacher, something like that. Sally Field in the cut.
Great
girl from. Where's that girl from? Is she an Uncle Buck? She was like a kid last time I remember her. But there's Jason Segel too. It's great. It's Adam McKay. I'm very entertained.
So, listen, I'm usually a big fan of Adam McKay. I have not been a big fan of his recently. I think that he's gone a little too over the top on his content. I appreciate more of his earlier stuff. I love Anchorman, obviously one of the funniest movies of all time. I love The Big Short as well. But then when we started creeping into like Vice, into there, the latest movie on Netflix, Don't Look Up, was not a fan of that either. I think he's going a little too over the top with his satire, and it's just like it's trying to be like a light beer version of Wolf of Wall Street, and that's a hard pass for me. And I watched the first couple episodes of Winning Time, and I thought it was so over the top, especially with the Jerry West stuff. I actually felt bad for Jerry West. And I was just like, there's no fucking way that this is an accurate rendition of Jerry West or even Magic Johnson for that matter. And it just was a big turnoff for me. It was just way too, the satirical over the top with these guys. And I could appreciate if you're based on a true story was at least 60 to 70% accurate. But when it starts dipping down to like 50, 40%, I'm good. I'm out.
I think the
It's like,
important thing. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's like cool tits and booze and drugs. Awesome. Like that. I'm fucking 40, man. I've seen that stuff before. You got to get me with something else.
That's why it's on HBO. But John C. Reilly, he was on Colbert, one of those shows recently, and talking about the story of Dr. Jerry Buss, of course, too, and just giving everybody sort of that elevator pitch on the Lakers dynasty. It really is. I think that's what you got to focus on is the actual storyline, which it remains true to, and the coaching struggles, and then how Pat Riley's there and he's just doing commentary on the side to start, and Magic's the young buck. Like those things that are truthful, you're going to throw more tits in there, more relationships and magic and controversy there, and making Jerry West a huge asshole, things like that. Because there was a lot of egos in that Lakers organization. But yeah, that storyline of the dynasty starting up, and I kind of like how it's breaking the fourth wall too, and John C. Reilly and other people talking to the camera as well, talking about Magic getting courted by Phil Knight for a while and possibly going to Nike instead of Converse, and interesting things like we have yet to see the guy who's going to play Larry Bird, but it's fun. That's what it comes back to me. I'm here to be entertained, and it has some, typical HBO drama to it. I know that, the inaccuracies may bother you, but that's what it's building up to is the true parts of it. When you get to see Pat Riley take the reins and you start to see Doc Buss's faith in this organization really pay off.
Yeah, it is based on a book. It's been a highly contested book. It's been a book that a lot of the factual individuals who were implicated in the book have said that's not quite how it went down.
Sure.
So, it's tough to translate these things. So, I mean, HBO's got another hit. I know a lot of people are going to continue to keep watching it. It's not quite for me. So I'm out.
I'm liking the film look they got to it too. It feels very 70s.
I do like that. It feels very Boogie Nights.
Yeah, exactly. John C. Reilly was in, and he has a tremendous comb over. He demos the Dr. Jerry Buss comb over, which is really great. And it's not for everybody, Ross. We end on this.
Yep.
Name an actor with no bad movies. We could say Gilbert Gottfried, couldn't we?
You could.
Some would say Leo. Some would say Denzel, perhaps.
Hey, Leo's got bad movies.
He does have bad movies. They all have bad movies.
If you've ever seen The Beach, you can name me an actor right now who's great, and I'll tell you a bad movie off the top of my head. It doesn't exist.
John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly. I don't like Step Brothers. Personally.
Oh, Ross.
I'm not a fan of Step Brothers. What's the Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story? I'm good on that too.
Oh, it's a fantastic one.
I'm good.
Get out of here, Dewey. You don't want no part of this. I'm going to get that drop for next week. I think Ross and I would agree that there's not really a right answer besides Michael Jeffrey Jordan. End of list.
Yes. Who would you say has the best IMDb? That if you would put a guy out there, IMDb for IMDb, who are you picking? One actor.
You have to repeat the question. You cut out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who would you pick? One actor. You have to put their IMDb up against anybody. Best of best.
Their IMDb up against anybody?
IMDb. Their movie catalog.
I mean, I was looking. I went on a deep dive with Leo, and The Beach is sure. Like the early stuff may not be hitting. I think later on you start to get really picky. Like he doesn't have the number of titles like a Jeff Bridges has, or obviously like Samuel L. Jackson doesn't turn down work. At a certain point, you just do it to get paid, right? But it really, there was a lot of truth, I think, between him and Denzel. I think the Denzel does the crappy action movies to an extent, and Leo remains. Someone said Jared Leto too. Like Jared Leto.
Awful movies.
Bad movies.
He literally has one out right now. Morbius. Is fucking terrible. Yeah. It's terrible.
People are saying, man.
It's terrible.
Everybody who's a career actor, you're gonna be doing like a Cars 8 and you're going to be like, I get $1 million paycheck for sitting behind a microphone. You know,
I will
I'll just
say,
Philip Seymour Hoffman. I don't
yeah,
know.
Phil Seymour. Yeah, Phil Seymour Hoffman is a great one. I would say Daniel Day-Lewis is probably
Sure.
the closest we've had to like a damn near perfect IMDb. I mean, the guy, Nine was a bad movie, but Phantom Thread, Lincoln, There Will Be Blood, Gangs of New York, The Boxer, I can go on and on. I mean, My Left Foot,
Foot.
the guy was super selective with his roles. He doesn't really act that much anymore, but he might have one of the best IMDb's out there from a huge marquee brand name.
Yeah, no question. Daniel Day-Lewis is hitting right there. Even the old guys like Pacino and De Niro have done some bad movies.
They've done like Las Vegas and
Las
yeah,
Vegas.
it's
Pacino
ridiculous.
did that. What was it? Some Adam Sandler movie where he was interested.
Oh,
The Jack and Jill movie. He was
you say
that.
Adam Sandler to me, I'm out.
Adam Sandler.
You say Adam Sandler to me, I'm completely out.
He's got nothing but hits.
I'm fucking out.
We're out of time. Thanks to everybody for listening in. Remember, this podcast and an episode of Mac and Read will be on Spotify, iTunes, and it'll be on YouTube. Thanks to Barroom for giving us a home as usual. We'll do a podcast soon. Programming Note won't be on next Wednesday live. I'll be out of town, but we will do a podcast to talk about the Bulls and their playoff run and everything else that's going on.
Absolutely. Happy Easter, everybody. Don't eat too many
Happy
peeps.
Easter. How do you feel about Peeps on that?
I'm in on peeps.
I hate them. Hate them.
Yeah.
The worst. Give me a Reese's egg and I'm out. So long, everybody.
See you guys.